Welcome back to Between the Before and After, a podcast about the stories that shape us. I'm your host, Coach John McLaren, and each episode I bring you an inspiring guest with a moving story that shines a light on the power of the human spirit. I'm excited to share this story with you, so let's dive in. Ladies and gentlemen, it's very hard for me not to want to slip into my announcer's voice because I have the special pleasure today of chatting with Aaron Mashvitz, who, amongst other things in his story, has been a professional wrestler. And so, Aaron, welcome to the show.
Hey, John, thanks for having me. Yeah, that seems to be always the, I guess, the coolest part. And it is pretty cool. It was a dream of mine for a long time to be a pro wrestler, and I got to do it. So yeah, it's an important, very, very important part of my story. And it basically intertwines with almost everything that's now happening in my life. So thanks for having me.
Yeah. Has anybody done like a pro wrestling style introduction for you on their podcast?
They have not. They have not. I mean, maybe when I was like actually going by my name, Jackson Stone, and I did some WWE tryouts, maybe 2017, 2018. I did a bunch of podcasts after that. And so they may have done them then, but that's a long time ago. So, but yeah.
Well, unfortunately, I have just a little bit of a hoarse throat today, so I'm not quite in full gear for doing that. Otherwise, I would absolutely love to do that. But before we dive into your story, which has many, many twists and turns, and I'm excited to explore, just to let people know, what are you up to presently?
Oh, that's a good question, and one I always have trouble answering. But I'll give you. I'll try to give it the tight version. One, I have a podcast. It's called Something for Everybody. We're about 180 episodes into that. I love baseball, so I coach youth baseball, and I also work on the mental skills. So I'm a mental skills coach as well inside of baseball. I own and operate a mental health nonprofit called You Are Loved. And through that, I do a bunch of speaking engagements at schools and businesses talking about mental health and intertwining that with mental skills. And yeah, so that's pretty much it for the most part, I'd say. Yeah, outside of that.
Just a couple things there to keep you busy. The struggle is real trying to keep these sorts of things all organized. I know because I'm a podcaster, I'm an educator, as well as I run a coaching company. So I can enter into some degree to some of those challenges. So going back to like when you were a kid, what did you picture maybe that you were going to pursue? What did you want to be when you grew up?
From about 4 until 13, I was going to be a professional baseball player.
Yeah.
And then at age 13, that's when I saw WWE for the very first time. Then it was, okay, I'm going to be a professional baseball player or a WWE world champion. So that was the goal. That was the dream. My whole life shaped around those two things. And I've actually been extremely lucky to be able to pursue both dreams to my full potential. But yeah, I also wanted to be a superhero. I really like Batman and the Green Lantern. Those are my two favorite when I was growing up. Oh, and the White Power Ranger. That was also my favorite.
All right.
So yeah, I guess being a pro wrestler was a culmination of that. But yeah, love baseball, love pro wrestling.
Yeah, pro wrestling, you get to be kind of a larger than life character. I'm curious how you felt about Ryan Reynolds and his take on the Green Lantern.
I mean, I enjoyed the movie. It wasn't awesome by any means. He's way better as Deadpool, that's for sure. Right. An excellent film. But I think they should make another Green Lantern because that's like a cool movie, right? It has a good story. Like it uses the imagination with the ring, and there's a lot of characters you can involve, and there's many different Green Lanterns that have happened out of history and all the comics. I think someone could take on that role. That'd be sweet.
Yeah. I think it's really sort of untapped potential there, but it is hard to compete with Deadpool. Deadpool was like made for Ryan Reynolds. So speaking of acting and performing. So when you saw your first WWE show, was this on TV or did you go to a live event?
It was on TV. It was the summer before I went to high school.
Yeah.
And I had just like come to the realization that I was like, because in middle school, I played baseball, I played football, and I played basketball. And like in the summer before high school started, I came to the realization that I was like not good at basketball, and I was still very small, and I didn't really like football anymore because in Texas it's like very serious, and it didn't suit well for me. But I knew I loved baseball. I wasn't very good at it yet, but I was going to play in high school no matter what. And so I'm popping on the TV, kind of like sad a little bit about that coming to an end and not knowing what else I'm going to do or whatever. And then boom, there's John Cena right on the TV. He's working with Edge for their program going to SummerSlam. And then Edge goes to John Cena's dad's house. He slaps him in the face. And I'm like, what's happening? Why is he slapping him in the face? Why is he at his dad's house? Is this normal television? And then keep moving forward. I saw a match and I was like, oh my God, this is like the superheroes that I love. But now they're fighting and they're talking. And I was like, I ran downstairs to my mom and dad. I said, this is what I'm going to be. I thought you thought I was going to be a baseball player, but nope, I'm going to be a professional wrestler. And my parents are the best parents in the whole world. I might be a little biased, but I think they are. And they were like, hey, we support you. My dad started taking me to Raw. They bought me t-shirts and I had all the DVDs before you could, do everything on streaming. And it was that in baseball games, Monday Night Raw, baseball, Monday Night Raw, baseball. We're traveling everywhere to see this, to do that. And so that's, and then I joined the wrestling team in high school thinking that it was WWE. It was amateur wrestling. I think most people in that profession have made that mistake. So that's a common story, but I still quite funny.
Yeah.
But it helped me. It helped me start. It got me into the gym, which has been a cornerstone of my entire life. I made friends. Found out that other people like WWE inside of wrestling because they made the same mistake as I did. So it was cool. So that's sort of where the journey began in terms of my wrestling love and working out and things like that.
Right. Yeah. So were you a teenager when you first got to go see a live show? And if so, who did you get to see perform live?
Ooh, I think you might have stumped me in my own history. I only remember the first time I saw it on TV. I don't remember who my dad and I saw when we went to Raw live, because I think he only went to a couple with me, and then he realized that I had friends who would rather go, and he was like, cool, they can go with you. I went to a lot. I don't remember what was the first one. I went to a couple WrestleManias and things like that because I was working the weekends that they were going on and things like that. You stumped me on my own history. I maybe need to go back and look at that.
Yeah. So you're living in Dallas, is that right?
At this time, yes, I am.
Yeah. And are you born and raised Texas?
I was born close to San Francisco, California, and then we moved to Dallas when I was, let's say, 11 and 12-ish. I started seventh grade in Dallas, so I was like gung-ho about playing football because it wasn't really big in California. And then I got my ass whooped for 2 straight years and decided that wasn't for me. And then I guess I went into wrestling and got my ass whooped there too, but I liked it better. It had a better vibe. I don't know.
Right. Well, I recall my first show was before we started recording. I mentioned 1991. It was The Undertaker. The headliner was The Undertaker versus The Ultimate Warrior. That was incredible. There was Honky Tonk Man fought. Who did he fight? Greg Valentine. I remember that because we were like right under the speakers at the Pacific Coliseum in Vancouver where the show was happening, and here I'm like 9 years old, and they're just blaring like so loud, and Greg the Hammer Valentine's like music in particular had something very like clangy to it. And I remember like my ears kind of hurting. There was the Bushwhackers. The whole reason we went to this show was because my dad has New Zealand heritage. And so my uncle wanted us to go and see the Bushwhackers, who were these guys, Luke and Butch from New Zealand, these crazy guys. And so, and then there was Demolition fought Legion of Doom, another sort of legendary like tag teams. And clearly here I am like 30 years later, still remembering it. So it left a huge imprint, these larger than life characters. And I had an Ultimate Warrior poster on my wall. Just imagining these guys. And of course, this is pre-internet days, so I had no idea that any of this was scripted. To me, it was like larger than life, this incredible thing to watch. And so did you, before you got into wrestling yourself, like professional wrestling as the entertainment sport, did you get to meet any like professional wrestlers from the WWE or any other major circuits?
Not before I entered the independent circuit myself, and then I met quite a few guys since then. But no, I never just went to shows and enjoyed as a fan, but it never went to like meet and greets and things like that until I got into it.
Yeah. So when you started sort of getting this passion for pro wrestling, what in particular like drew you to this? What was it that like sucked you in? Because I think there's a lot of outside observers who look at professional wrestling as an entertainment. It's a crossover between entertainment and sport. Like it does require a degree of athleticism as well. But a lot of people sort of, they don't take it seriously. They look at it as like maybe a sort of a carnival freak show. But what was it that made you like so seriously want to be a part of it?
Well, I mean, for me, it was just it was a beautiful combination of everything that I loved. I mean, I loved sports.
Mm.
I loved theater. I used to do plays
Yeah.
when I was in middle school. Couldn't do them in high school because of baseball. And I loved superheroes. I was obsessed with all three of those things. And I see this thing on TV of like one guy being able to do all of these things. He's punching and kicking. He's talking. The fans are screaming. Everyone's engaged. I'm like, what's happening here? How can I be this person? And it's like John Cena with his headband wrapped around his arm. I'm like, can I have arms that big? Is that possible? Uh,
Right. Yeah.
and so that's the combination of all of that. And just like I mean, for me, I thought it was the realest thing I'd ever seen. I'm like, I sort of knew that superheroes weren't totally real, but I wasn't convinced yet at 13 because I wanted to be
Right.
one so badly. But this was real. This was a real person on TV, like fighting, jumping, moving, talking, screaming, engaging. I was like, yep, that's me. That's what I'm going to do. If I can't be a Major League Baseball player, I'm going to do that right there.
And so I wonder, like going through the teen years, did this ever get like, or your passion for this ever like get mocked, or were you ever seen as, this is ridiculous because we're sitting here planning on, I don't know, going to college and maybe going to law school or med school or something like that, and you're sitting here passionate about this?
Oh man, all the time, dude. I would wear wrestling shirts to school. And the only reason I had anyone to sit and eat lunch with is because this one dude was like, hey, you like WWE? I see your shirt. Come eat with us. And there was just like the three of us who sat lunch, and ate lunch like away from everyone else. Seemed like we were the social pariahs for whatever reason. And we just talked WWE and wrestling and all of that stuff. And so it for wrestling, it created a community for me, even before I
Mm-hmm.
was even inside of the business of actually being a performer. But like it creates friends because it's such a niche thing. Like if you
Yeah.
really love this thing, like it's so beautiful. And like that's an important note for like anyone. Like it doesn't matter what you're interested in. You could love turtles or whatever the
Mm.
case is, right? Just like try to express it. Try to find your community, right? Because those people feel the same way about the thing that you love. And that's such a special bond that you can never take away. I literally would have eaten lunch by myself,
Yeah.
like for real, if
Right.
I hadn't worn a WWE shirt one day to school. And I was like a bit nervous to wear it because you knew like, is this weird? Like, why am I not just wearing like a Dallas Cowboy shirt or like whatever other people wear or whatever,
Right.
right? But like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
the only reason I had lunch. And I was very unconfident in high school. And
Mm.
the way a lot of people feel about themselves, we're unsure who we are. And, we're not sure what
Mm-hmm.
direction we want to take. But I had this thing in the back of my head that I was going to achieve it. But I didn't outwardly like look like I knew what I wanted to do with my life. I knew I was going to be a wrestler. I knew it. I knew I was
Yeah.
going to be a baseball player, a wrestler. And even my high school baseball teammates were like, if you had to choose right now to go to MLB or WWE, what would it be? I was like, WWE for sure. Not even,
Yeah.
no questions asked.
Yeah.
But that I still wanted to pursue my baseball career till its fullest potential, and I
Yeah.
believe that I did. But
Yeah.
wrestling gave me a community, and it gave me a community as an adult too. Once I left sport, which is like a whole nother really complicated thing about not being able to play your sport anymore, and that identity and how you
Mm.
shape yourself
Yeah.
and things like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And in baseball, what position did you play?
I played first base.
Okay. It seems like that's like a tricky spot to play because you're kind of like in the line of fire a lot, and if you make a mistake there, it's going to cost you quite a bit.
Well, it's an interesting position because historically, it's a position where you're supposed to be a really good hitter.
Hmm.
But also defensively, that spot is extremely important because that person makes a lot of plays and a lot of catches.
Yeah.
But normally, they're not the greatest defender or they're not the most agile person. But over time, that's developed, right? Because people are getting bigger, stronger, and faster. So now you have this guy
Right.
who's 6'4" who can hit a 450-foot home run and also move left and right and pick the ball and throw the ball 90 across the diamond and things like that.
Right.
So it's elevated. I was a very good hitter. That was sort of my bread and butter, but I became a
Yeah.
good defender later in my career, which was quite helpful. But
Yeah.
usually right-handed hitting first basemen who also field right-handed aren't as needed as left-handed hitting first basemen.
Right.
So it's just an interesting thing.
Yeah.
But it all worked out the way it needed to. I didn't think that then. I was very resentful and bitter about how it
Right.
worked
Right.
out, but now I know that that's how it's supposed to go.
Right, and I guess I don't follow baseball a lot as an adult, but I was just thinking, like, statistically speaking, first base has to see like more action than the other ones because um, you're going to get more people onto first base than onto second and third and to home, and so uh, yeah, it's kind of a tricky one that you have to be like more switched on than I shouldn't say more switched on, but it's also interesting to use terms like offense and defense on base in baseball. And I know obviously these are realities, but I think like I'm a fan of hockey and basketball where it's much more pronounced and it's team on team, like in sort of direct confrontation. And baseball is kind of different in that regard. It's like one guy versus the team, one step at a time.
It's the most individual team sport there is. It's it's quite interesting, right? Because I coach a 14U baseball team,
Mhm.
and trying to get them to understand that when you go to the plate, when you're about to hit, the team is sort of out of the question, right? Unless in certain situations, right, you need a bunt, you need to get a guy over, there needs to be a sacrifice, right? You're always generally thinking about the team, but there are certain at bats where I'm trying to hit a double or I'm trying to hit a home run, and that's the sole focus is me versus the pitcher, not really the team. Like me
Mhm,
getting a
mhm.
double helps the team, but I'm thinking about this one-on-one battle, going to work with this pitcher. What's he throwing? Give me his best so I can give my best. And it's the same way when you're on the field, right? No one can field the ball for you. Yeah, there's other guys around you, but if the ball comes right at me, that's an individual making an individual play for the team. And so
Right.
it's an interesting dynamic, right? You want to create the sense of trust. It's very important when it comes to baseball. Like, because if I look across to my shortstop or to my left fielder, I'm like, yeah, if the ball sits to them, they're definitely going to make that play. I believe in that. So as my pitcher, I know that I can throw strikes, and if they hit the ball, I have guys behind me that can make a play, right? But
Right.
if we're individual focused, we're going to play a little tighter, and we're not going to make pitches because we're going to try to think that
Mhm.
we need to strike everyone out because I can't hit it to Johnny who's in left field because he can't make any plays. And so
Right.
it's an interesting dynamic to try to get that chemistry figured out, that trust figured out, but also realizing what control you have over personally, your attitude, your effort, things like that, and how that can sort of bleed into everyone else on your team to create this dynamic where everyone's playing for each other, but also playing their best baseball for themselves. And so,
Right.
yeah.
I like that framing of it, like the most individual team sport there is, and yeah, the battle of like pitcher versus batter, and thinking maybe I'm off the mark here, but I feel like fans of baseball are more stats driven than fans of other sports. Like every sport keeps statistics, but I think baseball keeps more statistics. Would that be accurate?
I think so. I mean, if you're a baseball fanatic, right, the game is slow, right? They're
Yeah.
trying to speed up the game. So if you love baseball, you love sort of the art of baseball, and you love
Right.
looking at the metrics and the averages and where he might hit the baseball, or things like that. So you're definitely looking at, on base percentage and slugging percentage and batting average a little bit more than you would if you're a huge basketball fan and you may or may not know like LeBron James's field goal percentage. It's not
Sure.
important. You want to see him dunk,
Right.
right? But there's not
Right.
that many exciting things that happen in the game of baseball unless you really love it. And then you get the
Yeah.
intricacies of it. Like, okay, why are they doing this? There's a game of chess always happening. Why are they trying to sort of
Right.
steal the
Yeah.
signs here? Why are they shifting to 2 inches to the right or 2 inches to the left? Why are they moving that guy back? All based on sort of angles and things like that. And so that's where the game becomes very fun if you actually can
Yeah.
study it a little bit and see the art for what it is. Because I mean, I think personally, hitting a baseball is the hardest thing to do in any sport. Period.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
why if you get a hit 3 out of 10 times, you're the best player in the league. In any other
Right.
sport, like that number is like you're on the bench or you cut from the team.
Right. Yeah, that's something to think about. And I agree there's an element of sort of chess. I came across a stat recently, like the smallest professional baseball stadium in the US holds something like 35,000 fans. And so to me that kind of blows my mind to think about like, especially if a team routinely gets sellouts. And so I think maybe baseball is not just about the game, but it's about the stadium experience. And because they play 160, they play like double the amount of games of like really any other professional major league. How they manage to, I guess, keep drawing fans in, game after game and build like a passionate fan base. It has to be more than maybe even the game itself, but like a stadium experience.
Oh yeah. Yeah, stadium experience, fan experience. What are you going to do at the game? The food they have, how they market the players. Are you getting to know them a little bit better? Like, do I feel like I know the starting center fielder like a little bit better than just like a guy with a number 17 on his back, right? So trying to create that a little bit, and then it's a long it's a long season though. So some games there's 12,000 people there. Some games there's 40,000, and also.
Right.
In certain cities, baseball fans can be a little fickle. So if the team is doing well, they show up. If they don't show up. But there's some really good baseball cities like St. Louis and Chicago and Boston. Those are some really good baseball cities.
Right. So between the two, so you've been juggling, or we're juggling at this point in your life, the world of baseball and the world of professional wrestling. How did you get into the independent circuit? People might hear this and think how does someone break into the wrestling game as, hey, I would actually like to do this?
Yeah. So I stopped playing baseball in 2014 after my college career. And I had some tryouts with the Atlanta Braves to play professional baseball, and decided to sort of move away from that and go back home to Dallas and start my professional wrestling career. And didn't really know how to start. So I Googled how to become a professional wrestler.
As you do.
As you do. Yeah. Thank you to the internet. And basically a bunch of just schools came up. I was like, oh, I guess you go to a school and you get trained. And okay. So I looked for some that are local to me, and I found one in a city that's called Bedford, Texas, which is 45 minutes away from Dallas. I emailed the guy, went out to like a training session, saw what it was about, saw that it actually was professional wrestling. And said I'd like to get trained, and then I'd like to go to WWE. Little did I know that it takes a lot more work to get to WWE. I didn't even know that independent professional wrestling existed. So I opened my eyes to a whole new world and a whole new career that I could potentially have outside of WWE, still doing the thing I loved. So I started training 2015 maybe, and had my first match in 2016 or 2015. I can't remember now. I donned my name, Jackson Stone, and I started traveling from there, and things, went in a pretty good direction for a long time.
Right. So you go to this wrestling school and say, hey, I want to be a pro wrestler. And in fact, I want to make the WWE. And maybe the trainer or trainers there just kind of smile and go, yeah, you and thousands of other people who want to make the roster, right?
Right. You and every other person who gave their pillow an elbow drop.
Right. So prior to going to wrestling, training school, had you on your own looked at YouTube videos or anything, or tried to practice or learn any moves or anything about that? Or were you totally green walking into the school?
No sort of wrestling moves per se, outside of just doing amateur wrestling in high school. But I took a 8-week theater class, and I took an 8-week improv class at Dallas Comedy House. So I think both of those things helped me sort of get in tune with how to speak in front of people, because I hadn't done public speaking at all at this point. Didn't need it in my baseball career. So the interviews I did in my baseball career are atrocious. If you'd like to go back and look at those, they're really quite funny at this point. But yeah, so I wanted to be able to learn how to speak and emote and use my face to express emotions and things that I knew that I was going to need, how to cut promos and engage an audience. So I was working on that stuff sort of in the midst of joining the professional wrestling school. And that helped me a lot in terms of being able to just be one step ahead of everyone else that was just doing sort of the bare minimum. And I also happen to be in really good shape. I'm 6'2", 230 pounds. And so that also helped my sort of get noticed quickly by whoever was there, whatever the case may be. But yeah, so a combination of those two things helped me have an early, high trajectory for my career.
Right. Now, is Dallas itself kind of a hotbed for professional wrestling, or are there any particular areas in the US that are wrestling kind of hotbeds?
The East Coast is quite good, sort of in that Philly, New York, New England sphere. And Texas is all right. It's just so big and so spread out that it's hard to leave the state itself. So you sort of might get stuck in the state doing the same shows, because you can travel 8 hours and you're still in the same state. But they do put on really good shows out here. And that Ohio sort of Midwest region has also some really good wrestling itself. But each state is fairly got a fairly good run of indie wrestling. Some obviously much better than others, as you know and witnessed yourself. But yeah.
Yes, yeah. How many, or I guess what would be like the minor league? So if WWE is like the major league, and they used to have the competitor WCW, and I don't know if there is any current competitor to WWE, but what are like the minor leagues of the circuit that are like one step below WWE?
Yeah, so there's WWE, there's AEW, which is basically WWE's competitor now, and then the whole basically independent professional wrestling circuit is sort of quote unquote the minor leagues. Nowadays, guys are making full-time livings being on the independent circuit because they can, charge their own rate. They can do anything outside of outside that they want. There's no someone controlling their name or their likeness. So people are making a lot more money now on the independent circuit outside of WWE. A lot of WWE guys have left to join the indie circuit so they can have sort of full control and full autonomy over their name and where they go and how they wrestle and who they wrestle and things like that. And so, when I it was really hard to make a bit of money, but as I progressed a couple years into my career, it got a lot better to make a decent amount of money on the independent circuit. And nowadays, from little that I know, I'm not fully entrenched in it as much. But guys are making good, guys and gals are making quite a bit of money on the indie circuit, and they're not as likely to get bought by WWE with a really shitty deal because they're making their own money, so they can bargain for themselves and they can have agency over their lives. And that's much better just for everyone involved. So people are getting the best deals possible.
And I love that you mentioned like improv and drama and things like that, because character development is central to the art of professional wrestling. Like without a character, you don't have a reason for why these guys are fighting. I mean, if we think about any other prize fighting like boxing or MMA or things like that, the biggest draws are not necessarily the most talented fighters. They're the ones with a story. I'm not going to name any names, but there's a couple that come to mind that are, they're a draw because they tell a story and they've created a character. When you trained as a pro wrestler, did you have sort of a character idea in mind, or how does that emerge? Like, how does Jackson Stone emerge?
I didn't have per se a character in mind, but there were a few people that I really liked. One being The Miz, the other being the model Rick Martel.
And that's old school.
Yeah, he was awesome. And so Jackson Stone sort of came out of The Rock was one of my favorite wrestlers, and in college my teammates used to call me the Pebble.
Okay. Right. I love that.
And so
that's a bit of a nod. Yeah.
I couldn't be that as a professional wrestler unless I was, playing a joke of a character, which would have been cool for a funny show. But so I just changed that to Stone. And then I really liked the show Sons of Anarchy, and the main character, his name was Jax Teller. So I created my name as Jackson, Jaxon. And then sort of for the first part of my career, like maybe the first 6 months to a year, I didn't really have a character. I was just like being a wrestler. And then one night I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like, I got it. I got the $1 million idea. It's lights, camera, Jackson. That's it. I'm done. Finished. It's great. It's the best.
That's fantastic. And so you go to do kind of like your first show as a pro wrestler, and you make your entrance. What did you have as entrance music?
My very first wrestling match, I had no entrance music. I just had to walk out there.
Wow.
Yes, because I was like trying out for this feud thing, and sort of I just had to like show up and walked out there. I wrestled for about 5 minutes against this guy. And my sister was there to film it, which is, quite powerful and important. It's actually on YouTube, available to watch right now on my YouTube channel.
I'm so going and checking that out after this interview.
Yes, it's not bad. It's not bad. And so, that was my very first match. It's just like a guy with some blue trunks named Jackson Stone. Super cool. Probably the second most nervous I've ever been. The first is when I proposed to my fiance like 2 months ago.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Other than that, that was it probably.
Yeah. And so you go out there and you have a match. Now, was this because there was no entrance music? Like, was this a show in front of a crowd, like where you interrupt something happening and that's how you make your entrance?
Yeah, like, it was there was maybe 150 people there, and like this guy was talking like, if anyone wants to challenge me, yada yada yada. And then, so I was like, I'll do it. So my entrance music was like me coming out saying, I'll challenge you, because like I was a nobody with no one knew who I was. So you don't need music, just go out there and prove yourself. And then ended up doing pretty good. So like more stuff kept coming from that. And, then I had some entrance music and created a character for myself and all of that. But yeah, that was quite nervous. He was like, yeah, you're just going to walk out there. I was like,
So, and for those who are kind of curious about like the behind the scenes, and I don't want to know the outcome of the match because I actually want to watch it develop. So I'm totally going to go. I don't want to spoil that, and so we're not going to put any spoilers in here because I think there is a genuine enjoyment that comes for those who are passionate about this art. And again, for those who might not know, I spent a year as a pro wrestling ring announcer, so I got a little bit of an inside look into this way of living as well. And it's a fascinating subculture, I have to say. But how much sort of time did you have with this guy talking about here's what we're going to do kind of thing? Like, had you ever met him before? Or is it literally like you meet in the locker room and like, hey kid, you're going to come out and do this thing?
I had met him a bunch of times before, because at the place that I trained, we had to set the ring up for every show.
Okay.
So for like the last 8 months, I was there every other Saturday night, setting up the ring, cleaning up the ring, doing all this stuff. So I met all the guys, and everyone was pretty cool, and everyone seems to help out. And then I got booked on the show, and this guy was more of an old school guy, which means they don't like to talk much before the matches. They just like to go out there and work on the fly. But man, was I nervous. So I needed a little bit of like, what do I do? How do I do it? Like, what's the structure? So man, maybe we talked for 20, 30 minutes. And then, 3 hours later, we wrestled. So it was pretty good. Yeah. He led me well, and he was able to communicate to me what I needed to do and all of that stuff. But yeah, it was quite cool.
Yeah. There's something about the term like helping someone get over. In other words, helping someone be believable. And so you think of like big names in wrestling, and what they do is they do a favor for like a younger guy coming up if they let them get over, even if they don't necessarily win the match, that they let them, have their moments of shine and things like that.
Yes, exactly. Much like podcasters can do by having someone they like on their podcast that hasn't reached as many viewers, and they share their audience with them, right? It's very similar. It's someone helping you out, someone saying, I see something good in you. Let me see what I can do, like help you in a match, or have you get over here, share my audience with you, or whatever the case may be, is right. It's all a beautiful thing.
Yeah. So your wrestling career kind of takes off from here. Are you able to make enough money to make a living? Like, what's your outside living arrangement? Are you like living as a bachelor in an apartment, living off of canned tuna and instant noodles here? Or what's going on outside of this?
Like my first 2 years of wrestling, I was local in Dallas. I wasn't traveling very much. So I was working as a personal trainer, which was going quite well. And then things started to take off, and I started to travel internationally. So I couldn't be a personal trainer anymore. So I was traveling internationally, mostly into Germany, the UK, and over in Europe. So then, about 3 or 4 years in, I was full time, and then I moved out to Philadelphia and was a full-time professional wrestler out there. And then, so it took me a little bit, but before that, I was trying to make it work. In between sort of coming back from traveling overseas to not be having a personal training job anymore, to being still on the road and sort of having to sleep in my car and bring my own sheets to hotels because they were not nice, and figuring out what food I was going to eat and things like that. My parents were very supportive. And I knew that I could sort of fall back on them if I really needed help. But, I wanted to try and, really go forward with this thing and give it my best effort. And I really did. And, I wanted to feel what it's like to have to go through that, to want something so bad and not have it handed to you. How can you keep working and keep working and keep working? And it proves off to be very good. So it paid itself out.
When was the moment when you realized like there is something here, like there's more than just this is a hobby? When did it kind of go click?
Oh, very early. Very early. Yeah, that's why I decided to go overseas earlier than most people, leave their small town.
Right.
Because I knew that I could get out there. I could make a name for myself. I was, 2 or 3 years in the business. I was confident in my abilities. And I was going to go out there. I was going to sink or swim. I was going to go out there. If I was going to be horrible, they were never going to have me back. I ended up being pretty good. So I did a bunch of tours and all of that stuff. But yeah, I had a lot of confidence in myself early on about my professional wrestling career. I think that carried over from how I carried myself as a baseball player and things like that. But I was lucky.
Yeah. And you came up with Lights Camera Jackson. Did that come before you were overseas and you'd kind of settle on a character and like an entrance music? Who did Lights Camera Jackson like become?
Movie star, baby.
Yeah. Okay.
Everything was a performance. So I started pretending to be a movie star on social media, at shows, unless I was just like in my house or, with my friends or whatever the case may be. Everything else was a pretend. And, I wasn't making very much money to be a movie star. I'd never been in a movie before.
Right.
That was the whole point of the character. And I tried to play it to the best of my ability. There's a bunch of content on YouTube if you go watch that match where there's some, stuff I curated and made as Lights Camera Jackson, the performer. But everything was Jackson Stone. That was my whole life. That's who I wanted to be, and that's who I was. I sort of foreclosed on everything else of my identity. I did the same thing as a baseball player. I didn't know how harmful that could be until after the fact. That's a lot of things that happen inside of professional wrestling that can be very dangerous. That you start to be this character all of the time and you don't know who you are. You never really knew who you were before that. And now you need this sort of validation from a crowd. You need strangers to tell you how good you are, to boo you. When you leave the arena or the ring, like there's no adrenaline anymore. So you need the uppers, you need downers, you need drugs, you need alcohol, you need women, you need all of these things to try and soothe you until you have your next show where you get your next high. And not saying this happens for everyone, but this is a common theme in professional wrestling. And we'll get to why I started my nonprofit, I'm sure. But a lot of the work that I do with my nonprofit is trying to set up mental health resources for professional wrestlers, because there just isn't any, especially at the independent level. There just isn't. There's nowhere for people to go. They don't have insurance. They can't do these things. Like they just need someone to talk to, or they need support, or need a guiding hand, right? A lot of at the bigger companies now, they're building those structures in, which is fantastic. But for independent wrestlers, there's not a lot of structure. So me and a team of us are trying to sort that out because what I dealt with and how much love I have for professional wrestling.
Right. And you really led into my next question, which is the dark side of wrestling. So we've talked about, the performance art and the love of it and the joy of it and the joy that it can bring others as you entertain them. But they're, and I know this from my wife being a performer as well, like if you can get really deeply immersed in a character, and that itself can be really difficult when you don't have a solid sense of identity outside of this to anchor to. And so you start morphing more and more into this character. And as you talked about, you go and you pursue the high, and then there's this low and there's this gap between shows, and it becomes like a bit of a roller coaster ride. Did you find yourself falling into that pattern, and was there a wake up call for you at some point?
The interesting part about wrestling, I'll just give you this before I talk personally, is that for the majority of people that are inside professional wrestling, they can tell you at least one story of how professional wrestling saved their life.
Right. Okay.
Those inside the ring doing the wrestling, they can also tell you that professional wrestling is what causes them the most harm. So it's so difficult to untangle that, because this thing that I'm doing is the thing that I love the most. And when I was a young boy or young person struggling, or I'm struggling now, professional wrestling is what is saving my life. But it's also the thing that causes me the most difficulty, the stress, anxiety, the high, all of these things. And so it's complicated. It's very complicated because you're trying to battle these sort of dual personalities while also maintaining relationships and other hobbies, but you can't because you're trying to be obsessed with this one thing because you want to make it your whole life. And it's very, very deep. But I never got super involved in terms of drinking, drugs, alcohol, because I took on professional wrestling like I took on baseball. Like I'm an athlete. So I'm going to do the things I need to do. I'm going to take care of myself. Yes, I went out and I drank alcohol and I had some good times with my friends and made some choices. It is what it is. But for the majority of time, like I was on the straight and narrow in terms of trying to achieve this goal. But that's not to say that I was fully consumed by Jackson Stone. That's who I was. And not till later on did I start to parse the two and figure out who I was outside of that and who I could be and what I was really passionate about. But it's interesting thinking about trying to become, really, really good at something, and what you have to do to get there. What are the sacrifices you have to make? Can you create a healthy pattern or healthy patterns for yourself to still allow you to get really good at that thing? Is there other things in your life that you can is there balance? Not really. Maybe an obsessive harmony is maybe a better way to say it. So there's like a lot that's happening, right? And you're putting an endless amount of hours, and a lot of time, the first maybe year or two or first 50 matches, there's very little money and there's no reward, and you're not sure how you're going to pay for gas on your way home. And so are you going to just use that money to buy something else? Or are you going to keep wrestling? Or are you just going to sleep in your car? Or are you going to, I don't know what you're going to do. And so there's a lot of things that go through it. And there's a lot of professions like this where you have to hustle and grind. But I would really like to see it turn where we can chase our dreams in a more healthy manner. We can chase our dreams while not giving up ourselves, while becoming our best selves in service of this dream, I think is the best way that I could put it. But yeah, it's quite complicated and not talked about a lot.
Yeah. And so as you're evolving as Jackson Stone, did you develop, like you mentioned, having a fiance? Were you in a relationship with this individual as a professional wrestler?
I was not. I did not start. Okay. Well, I guess at the very tail end of my career, I met my fiance. I met her 2 years ago. But she knows a little bit about it, and sometimes I show her the very new or the very old but were new pictures when I was taking them as Jackson Stone. She's like, I don't know about that. I'm glad I know you as this guy. And I'm like, I'm glad I know you as this guy too. Timing was perfect for us, and I'm blessed to be in that relationship. But in 2018, I was in a relationship with a female at that time, when sort of my whole life changed.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we dive into that, because we will, the span of your wrestling career, was it like 2015 to 2021 roughly? Or what was the timeline of your...
Yeah, roughly. It was roughly about 6 years, give or take, 2015, 2016 till 2022-ish, give or take some time there for COVID when we didn't have a job.
Right.
So that was a bit slow. And then at the tail end of my career, I was only really wrestling once a week. But at the height of it, I was doing Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday every week.
Okay. Yeah. So halfway through your wrestling career, just as you're really starting to catch steam, get momentum, you're becoming known, this is real, you're living the dream, your life is shattered by something probably tragic.
Yeah. So I'm living in Philadelphia at this time, with my good buddy Wheeler Yuta, who actually wrestles on TV now. So shout out to Yuta. And we're living in an apartment in Philadelphia, and I'm actually at the Jersey Shore with this girl that I was dating at the time and her family. And I get a call from a number that I don't know what it is. Never seen this number before. And some person's on the phone, and they kept saying their name. And I'm like, who are you? And I did know this person. It's a very, very close family friend. But apparently in this moment, I didn't know who they were. And they're telling me that my sister, my big sister, Rachel, who is a huge supporter of mine. As I said, she filmed my very first professional wrestling match. She created Jackson Stone websites and Jackson Stone merch, and she's incredible. That she had died. She had died by suicide, that she had taken her own life in our home that we grew up in Dallas. And I think when something like that happens, you don't think it's real. I'm like, but then it was real. I figured out who this person was, that they're a very close friend, and they were calling on behalf of my parents because my parents could not do it. They had me with them at the time. And I was lucky enough to be with people who drove me back to Philadelphia, drove me to the airport the next morning. I flew home to my parents the next day in Dallas. And yeah, my whole life, as you can imagine, altered and changed. Not to say that I reevaluated everything within the first minute. Just like anyone, I grieved, and I was sad, and I was angry, and I've tried to deal with my emotions in a I don't know what's the right word, good way, in an appropriate way, or actually seeing them
the healthiest way possible, which probably it does involve experiencing and processing and moving through them, as opposed to burying them and wishing they weren't there.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And so I spent the whole month of September, with my parents in Dallas, and I had this match, this professional wrestling match, planned and booked, a show that I really wanted to be on against my roommate, who was a very close friend of mine at the time, at the end of September. And I was like, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if I can do this. But like I said, everyone has that story where professional wrestling saved their life. And I knew I had this match at the end of the month. So it got me up every day to go to the gym, to do something, to engage myself in life still, even though I was feeling horrible. Not coming to terms with, is she really dead? All of these things that you think about when you lose someone you absolutely love. And so I fly back to Philadelphia. I have this match with Wheeler Yuta. Very few people in the crowd knew what I had dealt with because I hadn't really posted about it yet. But obviously my buddy Wheeler knew. His name is Paul, so I'll just say Paul. And then we had a very special moment after that match. We went outside and we both just cried because he was the first person that I told outside of the girl that was with me. I actually couldn't verbalize it to him, so she had to tell him for me, which now thinking about, that's not a very nice thing that I did to make her tell him that.
Right. But, in that moment, again, you're not really thinking about what's the most considerate way to navigate this.
Yeah.
Your brain is just being overwhelmed by these massive emotions that, kind of come out of nowhere. And, I think maybe there might be the question, maybe you've been asked this or pondered this before, was there ever any indication prior to that, or that this was a potential, like a possibility, or did this really come right out of the blue for you?
No, it wasn't out of the blue. My sister battled and struggled with severe depression and bipolar disorder. And I think she was developing schizophrenic tendencies at the end of her life. And so it's over 10 years she struggled. There was hospitalizations, there was suicide attempts, there was police phone calls. But through the midst of all of that, she graduated college, she became an engineer, she started working at Raytheon. And so there was a lot of good mixed in with a lot of the hard. And so there's sort of a like a looming black cloud over our family. Like, if we leave her, is this the day? Is this the day? And then my parents dealt with that a lot because she was living with them at the time. And, I wasn't close to home, and I hadn't been close to home for a long time. And, there's some regrets and some guilt that I feel about that, and things of that nature. But the mental health conditions are very complicated and very serious, and it has to be parsed out that everyone has mental health. You and I, John, have mental health, right? It's how we think, feel, and act. It encompasses our every single day, but it's much different than the very severe and pervasive mental health conditions that some people face. Like I mentioned, right? Severe depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, all of these things. And there are treatment plans. There's things that can help you, obviously. And if you're feeling any sort of way, you should go and seek those treatments. I know firsthand that they can help, and they can extend your life, and they can make your life great, and you can accomplish all the things you want to accomplish, just like my sister did. But unfortunately, she lost her battle, but leaves a beautiful legacy for me to remember, for me to think about how she was the most non-judgmental person that I've ever met in my life. My mental health nonprofit is now called You Are Loved, but way before that, I used to say that I hate everyone. I used to say that because I felt like they had to earn something from me. Like, I'm too good for that. They have to earn. I hate you before you have to earn. And so my sister would tell me, not that, give people a chance. There's a lot of love out there. And so I didn't learn that until after she died. And that's come with a lot of pain and a lot of, realization that I could have been better as a person, not as a brother. I feel like I was a really good brother, and she was a really good sister to me, the best. But just as a general person. So maybe I'm over rotating and trying extra hard to be a good person now, even though being a good person is really hard. It's not something that I say lightly. So I'm just trying. I feel like I'm just trying. And so backwards a little bit, we have this match, me and Yuta. It's the thing that probably saved my life, kept me going, kept me moving. And then about a month later, I break my cheekbone, shattered, can't wrestle for 10 weeks. So now my sister just died. The only thing that's keeping me going is wrestling. Now I break my cheekbone. I can't wrestle for 10 weeks. So I got a lot of time to sit and ponder and think about who I want to be, how I want to be. There was some crying. There was a lot of stuff. There was too much drinking. There was just a multitude of ways that I was trying to deal with my emotions. And I came out on top of that feeling like I wanted to do something. So this is when I started posting about mental health. I started talking about my feelings and about my sister and what she dealt with. I started this YouTube series, just sharing people's stories. I created a t-shirt that just had "You Are Loved" on it, based on, things I was selling for my pro wrestling site. And we sold 500 "You Are Loved" shirts and donated to a foundation called American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. And that was sort of the push to start doing the things I'm doing now. And then my jaw healed and I came back to professional wrestling in the same manner that I was wrestling before. So as a heel, as this bad guy, as Lights Camera Jackson. But over the last 10 months, I'd been posting about, or 10 weeks, excuse me, about mental health and things like that. And so, and I go to my first show and I'm trying to perform as this bad guy. And I did it for a couple shows and I felt sick to my stomach.
Right. Yeah.
Like, how am I going to be out here talking about love and empathy and support and guidance and things like that? And I'm going to go to a show and I know it's pretending, I know it's a script, and I know I'm playing a character to tell a little girl to shut up because I'm the heel, right? Instead of being nice to her and talking to her and signing her autographs and all these things. And so I had to make a change in my professional wrestling character, because up to that point, everything was curated and pretend and performative. So I changed. I just dropped Lights Camera Jackson. I dropped all of that. I kept Jackson Stone because you still need a stage name. Aaron Mashvitz is kind of hard to chant. So I just kept Jackson Stone. And I just, I was just me. Yeah. And I moved back to Dallas and I got back into the sort of the Texas wrestling scene and was able to sort of develop myself outside of professional wrestling. I took You Are Loved a little more seriously. I started a podcast a bit. And then fast forward all the way till COVID hitting. COVID hits. We lose our job as pro wrestlers because you can't wrestle in front of no people. And that was sort of the blessing I needed to really dive deep into everything. I went full throttle on my podcast. I created You Are Loved to be an actual 501c3. I got back into baseball coaching, all of these things. And so that's sort of the journey in a nutshell.
Right. Yeah. And so one thing I wanted to ask was, had you had opportunities to have like honest conversations with your sister, and maybe moments of lucidity where she was able to express, like, this is what my experience is with this, to try to put into words what her lived experience was?
Yes, we've had some of those conversations. Yeah. And so it helps me have an understanding of how dark really is dark, like, and what the depths of hell really fucking feel like. When people say that suicide is selfish, that's where I feel like they don't grasp the full understanding of what it means to be in the darkest pit of life.
Right.
And so I know it's a plausible and logical thing to say that suicide is selfish. It makes sense. It does. It makes sense. I get it, because this person that you love wasn't thinking about you, your dog, your life, your kids, your friends, your family, all the great moments you have that yesterday you told them you love them. They weren't thinking about that. Of course not. All they were thinking about in the darkest moment they've ever had in their whole life was that I have to fucking have this pain to stop. I actually might want to live, and I do want to see tomorrow, but I can't see tomorrow because this pain that I have is insurmountable, and it's fucking taking over my whole life, my whole body, my whole soul, my whole being. And it's hard to grasp that if you've never seen it in real life, or you've never heard it or felt it or experienced it yourself. And if you have experienced it yourself, thank you for still being here. If you were hearing my words right now, I fucking love you for being here. But that's a very important point, because the words we say when talking about mental health and suicide especially are extremely important, because we have no idea what any person has gone through. I don't know what you have gone through, John. We've been talking now for like over an hour, you know?
Yeah.
You now know what I've gone through, a small portion of it, right? But we don't know what people's stories are. We don't, until they're expressed through these great podcasts, right? That's why it's so important to talk about it, and not just talk about it in a way that's like, yeah, we should talk about mental health, but like really talk about it. Like, what do you feel? How do you feel? What got you to that point? How can we express more things to help people get out of that point? Where can we see the light? Where is the light? How can we create support groups or communities of support? Things like that. And that's what's sort of went on a tangent there, but yeah, that's what's important to me.
No, I think the passion is so important. You know, and I wonder if I could maybe ask a controversial question, and this doesn't come out of nowhere. Maybe at some point I'll explain where this question comes from. But you know, I work with psychologists. I work in the field of neuroscience and psychology. I'm a researcher in this area as well, not just in terms of what I do with coaching. And, you know, in a conversation with a very, very experienced psychologist who has more than 4 decades working with like severe personality disorders, you know, we were having a conversation in and around suicide, and she made this remark. I don't know the exact quote, but it was like, people do have the right to choose to end their life. And I almost in that moment didn't really know what to say. Because I mean, she's had clients do exactly that. You know, over the course of a 40-year career working with thousands of people, it's inevitable that she's going to have that happen. And so she said, like, some people do have the right to make that choice if they want to. And I'm not even sure the question I really want to phrase, but it's like having almost like opening the door to this thought here. You know, is it compassionate to try to have somebody continue to move forward through this immensely difficult, dark, and tortured existence for our sake and for our desire to have them a part of our lives, when they don't necessarily see a way out of it? How would you respond to that?
That's very interesting. I need to think about that.
Yeah, I didn't know either. And a little bit of context.
Okay.
One of the individuals I've interviewed for this podcast, her daughter committed suicide at the age of 16. And, you know, for a mother, that's one of the most difficult things to ever go through. But and her daughter's name was Jenny. And she said, but on the other side of this, in one sense, that Jenny kind of set her family free, because the whole family was so preoccupied with trying to help her to stay alive. And as from the age of 7, this young lady, Jenny, had just wrestled with all of these things in this really quite tortured existence. And she was, you know, this beautiful, enigmatic, charismatic, highly intelligent, like wise beyond her years person. But everyone in her family, her multiple siblings and her parents and her teachers, and were constantly on edge around her, trying to do whatever they could to convince her to continue living, because this wasn't the first time she had attempted that. And so again, it sort of brought to light this thought that a psychologist shared with me, that people do have the right to make that choice. And you know, as much as we want them to continue living, and we feel like from our perspective it is worth continuing to live, is it our place to force that choice on them if we've done everything we can?
Yeah, I think that last part is important. But yeah, so what comes to mind for me immediately is this one emotion that I had trouble admitting to myself that I felt. And it wasn't until I was going to these suicide loss survivor support groups where people were sharing, you know, their experience, and they were years ahead of me in their experience, talking about feeling relief. And the first time I heard relief, I was like, how could you feel relief? Your sibling just died. What the fuck? Get out of here. That's ridiculous. Relief. I'm not that person. I would never feel relief. I want my person here right now. And then you start to sit with it. You start to think, you start to actually deal with your emotions and your feelings and your person that you lost their whole life and what they went through. And then I finally admitted to myself, yeah, there is a sense of relief. There is. Just like that family, and just like I shared, there's sort of this 10 years of struggle and this black cloud, and like there's a breath you can take. Like, I don't have to sit here and worry every single day of my life for the rest of my life. Now, that's not to get it twisted that I wouldn't have her back right this very second.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But that is to say that there is a sense of relief, because now I can live my life knowing that she existed in a beautiful, powerful way, being my shining light, remembering all of the good things, but knowing that she's at peace and she doesn't have to live in hell every single day. And so I don't know if I would phrase it the same way that that psychologist did, but people do have, it is a choice. Like, I don't know if it's a full choice. Like, I don't know if they have the full faculties of their brain that they're making this conscious choice. I think they're simply trying to make the pain stop. I really do think that's where it goes, because they're not thinking about anyone else or their family or their loved ones. They're saying, I need to not feel this way anymore. And if you have moved to the point where you've exhausted all resources, everything you can possibly do for this person, just like cancer, you can do all of the things that the doctor recommends, and that person may still lose their battle. We're still fighting the cancer battle every single day. And it's very similar to a extremely severe and pervasive mental health condition. And again, it's on a spectrum. There's a lot of different things that can be placed on the spectrum of mental health. But when you have the most severe and the most pervasive, it is definitely an illness that takes over your whole life, your whole body, and your whole soul. And so at some point, you may lose your battle. And if you can frame it in that regard, for me, contextually, that was helpful to understand, like my sister a bit more, even though I had a lot of context of her battle. But I think that, those few thoughts pop up after what you mentioned.
And I appreciate you sharing that. And I felt like you might be able to kind of express some things around that, given the work that you do. It's not an easy conversation to have for anybody listening. I don't want people to think that this is somehow just an easy, casual conversation at this point in time. But this is a crucial conversation. I think the willingness to go to these areas and talk about them where everyone is afraid to, because, for example, you mentioned this word relief, and I imagine, and you can clarify, but I imagine you would experience in the beginning maybe some guilt at actually allowing yourself to feel relief, and wrestling with this. Like, am I allowed to feel relief? Am I allowed to laugh again? Am I allowed to, and so on. And so how do you go from that place of like refusing to feel relief because you feel guilty about it, to permitting yourself and becoming okay with feeling relief? And then maybe how do you move forward and maybe keep the memories of Rachel alive?
Yeah, it comes with some time. It comes with some patience, and it comes with doing the work. Like, I've been in a support group now for 5 years with people who are feeling the exact same way. And every after a loss is wrapped up in shame and guilt, especially from suicide, because you're like, what could I have done? Why wasn't I there? Why weren't you home? Why were you with her? What's wrong with you? What the fuck? You're a terrible brother. You piece of shit. You're a piece of shit. You're a piece of shit. Right. And I can't even imagine the things my parents are thinking, because it's totally different for them. Right. And so I've been trying to, we have a very close relationship. We always have. Like I said, I feel like I'm the luckiest person in the whole world with the parents that I got. But their struggle is totally different than mine. And so I sort of masked some of my feelings at the very beginning with trying to help them. But then had to deal with my own shit when I was sitting on my couch, eating ice cream, drinking a bottle of whiskey with a broken jaw. That's when you think about, okay, I gotta figure this out. And you sit with these things. You like sit with them, and you feel them. Okay, I feel guilty. Why do I feel guilty? Well, I feel like I wasn't there. Well, why wasn't I there? Okay, well, I was actually chasing my dream, doing the thing that my sister wanted me to do. She supported me all the way. Okay, that's a rational thought. Okay, I can think about that. Yeah, there's going to be some shame. Okay, but what can I change shame into? What's shame really? Well, shame is really that I'm angry. Okay, why am I angry? I'm angry because I'm not letting myself feel relief. And so it's all underneath all of these things that you have to get the root of. I'm not like excited that I was able to accept the fact that I felt relief, but it's a weight off my shoulder, that it's something that I can express to myself, that I feel this way about it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It can probably be said as well that those that we've lost to suicide, on the same token, if they could speak to us again, would say, keep living your life.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Move forward. Those that love us, like, don't stop doing this. Like you said, Rachel, she was like your biggest supporter, your fan. She did so much for you. Love to see you living out like your dream and watching it come to fruition. And those that are left surviving, we can get trapped in the world of should've, could've, would've, what ifs, trapped in the past and trapped in the future and possible future scenarios that could have played out. But bringing yourself back to the present and say, like, this individual would have said to me, keep living your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the first time that I went like a 24-hour period without thinking about my sister, I woke up in the middle of the night, like, so mad. Like, how are you going to have a good day? You fucking, again, you're a piece of shit. How are you going to have a good day? Your sister is dead and she had no good days at the end. How are you going to tell yourself that you can have a good day, that you can smile? And that was hard. Like, knowing, like, always internally knowing that my sister wanted me to have my best life, like knowing that full well, but not ever believing it until I actually believed it, until I started to actually do the work and think about these things and work through my emotions and go to support groups. And now my life, this September will be 5 years, and my life is amazing. And I have a trouble thinking about gratitude. Like, I love this life, but I don't know if it would have came if my sister was still here. I don't know any of that. I'm not God, right? Of course. But I know that the things I have in my life currently, I am grateful for them. And I express gratitude immensely all of the time. But I don't know if I'm grateful for the situation. Like, so I have trouble, like, sort of extrapolating the two about how beautiful my life is now. And I have an amazing fiance. We're about to get married, and my parents are healthy, and we have an awesome relationship, and my friends and my work. And like, just sitting here at 5:45 talking to you is like, who would have thought? Like, this is a job. All right. Sounds great. Sign me up. Right. Yeah. Being able to express my sister and her love and all that stuff. But I haven't found the right words to think about the actual situation and how it turned out 5 years later. And, I think it's also important to note that if you go through a tragic event, like something really, really hard and painful, you don't have to make it your life's mission. You do not.
Right.
But you don't, like, no matter what social media says about all of this stuff, right? You just have to be able to find some peace in it so that you can move forward with the life you were continually living. Now, if it was a life that you hate, then it's great. It's perfect time. And pain is the greatest indicator for change. Then, okay, it's time to make a change. Life is precious and fragile and beautiful. How can we say I love you a little bit more? If that's the indicator you need, great. But if you were already living a life that you wanted to live and something unpredictable and really hard and tragic happened, you don't have to turn it into your life's mission and save the whole entire planet. You could just be the person you were being, right? Because the little communities we create have downstream effects. I needed to make a change in my life, and this is the thing that forced me to change, to force me to reevaluate, to do the thing that I'm doing. And now I feel like I'm on a mission. I'm on a mission, a driven, purpose-filled mission. And I wake up every day feeling that way. It started off with me trying to save the world, and that doesn't work. I can't save the world, but I can work my hardest to do the best I can. And whoever that touches, that's fantastic.
I love that. Yeah.
And so,
it's, and I'm so glad that you also take the pressure off of going through a tragic event does not mean you have to turn this into like your life's mission. I think the work that I do, I would not have be doing if I had not gone through violent trauma, right? And gone through years of mental health struggles myself. Like, and so I have an intimate understanding of what some of these struggles look like, not maybe specifically like, for example, what Rachel experienced, but I do have an understanding of what severe mental health struggles can look like. And so, but really it factored into what I was already going to do with my life, but prior to going through trauma, like I'd thought I wanted to marry my love of nutrition and exercise and things like that into some way, helping people live better lives. But I didn't recognize that it was going to take going through a decade of serious struggles to actually get me to the place that I'm doing this thing that I love and feel so called and compelled to do. And I wouldn't take the experience that I went through or the experiences that I went through out of my past, but I wouldn't put up my hand and say I'd like to go through that again.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah. Because we can't change it. We can't.
Yeah.
But we could do our best to, I don't know, manage it. I don't want to say make the best out of the situation. And those aren't adequate words, but I guess they'll work for now. But
they do, and as we bring this to a close, I know we could keep talking for quite a period of time. I know there's a lot more that I would love to ask and explore, but I think this is just a wonderful reason to go and spend more time learning about Aaron Mashvitz and the wonderful work that you do, the amazing work that you're doing. Before we get to my final question, if people they've been touched by what you're sharing, they're touched by your mission and what you're sharing and the work that you're doing now, how do they reach you and how do they connect with you and maybe even support what it is that you're doing?
So my nonprofit is called You Are Loved. We have merchandise. We post every day on social media, and there's a tab for donations if you feel so inclined. But all of that is at youarelovedlife.com. Youarelovedlife.com. And then if you like listening to me talk, I talk way more on on my podcast, which is called Something for Everybody. And you can find that anywhere you find John's podcast as well. So.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, before we close out, if someone's listened to this conversation today, and if they could just take one thing away from hearing these stories, what is it you would like people to take away from it?
Well, it's the same thing that I needed when I was at my worst, is that you are loved. And I don't care if it sounds cheesy or if it sounds lame. It's true. And you may not feel it in yourself right now currently, but there's someone out there who does feel that way about you. And there's a point in time that you can work towards where you feel a little bit better about yourself each day. And so maybe right now you totally despise yourself. And I get that feeling. I know that feeling, but there is, there's breath in your lungs, and that means there's time for you to continue getting up every single day and making the choice to move closer towards maybe not hating yourself, to maybe being okay about yourself, to maybe liking this part about yourself, to maybe feeling like you are worthy and you are loved, because you definitely are. It's not an easy thing. But it's a worthwhile passion. It's a worthwhile pursuit. I've come to learn that, from doing this work for a little bit over 5 years, or just about 5 years now. And I think the cheesier, the better. So
yeah,
you are loved. You're deeply loved and cared for. And you have a divine spark in you that needs to be expressed to the world. And only you can express it, because you're the only you, and you're the best version of you there ever will be. And so I hope you find that within you, and maybe these words will give you a little bit of encouragement to go out and try and do that for yourself. So that's what I feel.
I love that. And I love that you laid it out step by step. You don't just have to jump from self-loathing to self-loving. There's a process to get there. That's so helpful to clarify that. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for being on the show today. It has truly been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, man. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Between the Before and After. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave a review, because that helps this podcast to reach and inspire more people. I love exploring the stories that take place between the before and after, the powerful experiences that shape who we become, and I love human potential. I love the possibilities that lie within us. So whatever you may be up against, I hope these stories inspire you, because if you're still here, your story's not done yet, so keep moving forward.